Kim, what nu may be baleshu among the less intelligent persons, surena by the powerful, kalina by the personality of Kali, dhira self-controlled, biruna by one who is afraid of, apramatta one who is careful, pramateshu among the careless, ya one who, vrika tiger, rishu among man, vartate exists. Translation. Maharaj Parikshit considered that less intelligent men might find the personality of Kali to be very powerful, but that those who are self-controlled would have nothing to fear. The king was powerful like a tiger and took care for the foolish, careless persons. Purport: those who are not devotees of the Lord are careless and unintelligent. Unless one is thoroughly intelligent, one cannot be a devotee of the Lord. Those who are not devotees of the Lord fall prey to the actions of Kali. It will not be possible to bring about a saner condition in society unless we are prepared to accept the modes of action adopted by Maharaj Parikshit. That is, propagation of the devotional service of the Lord to the common man. Translation: Maharaj Parikshit considered that less intelligent men might find the personality of Kali to be very powerful, but that those who are self-controlled would have nothing to fear. The king was powerful like a tiger and took care for the foolish, careless persons. So we have two types of people mentioned here. Those who are self-controlled, or dhira, or intelligent people, and those who are in a much lesser position, pramatta, those who are always disturbed by material things, or those who are not very attentive. And also they're called baleshu, unintelligent, or like children. They don't have proper power to discern things. So the intelligent people are not afraid of Kali, whereas the people who are less intelligent, or the baleshu, those who are pramatta, always not very careful about things, they have to be afraid of Kali. In other words, they will get influenced by Kali very easily. So, what Prabhupada says in the purport, that these intelligent people who are very attentive, these are devotees. And everyone else is unintelligent and not careful. So, and then the solution is that the intelligent people should take care of the unintelligent people. So Parikshit Maharaj was the king. He was very qualified. He was a devotee of the Lord. So therefore he was intelligent and attentive. And he was able to take care of the people. And consequently, there's no problem for influence of Kali Yuga. So, in other words, if there are people who are intelligent and aware of things, that is devotees, then the people don't have to fear anything. Now, unfortunately, if they don't have much influence, then it's a problem. So if the king is there and he's a devotee, very good, because he can influence very easily. And he can inspire people, and he can enforce very easily. If the king is not in that position, of course, then it's much more difficult. Not impossible, but it's more difficult because of that situation where the leaders have, everyone is following a leader who is unintelligent, blind, and inattentive. So that, of course, is the position in Kali Yuga at the present time. We do have devotees. Their influence is And I say not so much because the leaders are the opposite and they're influencing the people in the opposite direction. So that's the problem we have now in the modern world. We have leaders who are in the wrong, doing wrong qualification, enforcing the influence of Kali Yuga rather than counteracting it. So, big problem. There's several ways of solving this problem. One, of course, is to try to restore the proper Varnashram Dharma. So Prabhupada says we have to reestablish Varnashram Dharma. But then how to do that? That's the problem. What do? We make a whole new political system and put a king in charge. Okay, if we have someone qualified like Pariksha, then it's possible. If we don't, then it won't work. So that's one problem we have. And then given the present setup of things, it's difficult to change the political structure of society in the modern world. Very, very difficult to do that at the present time. So that option is more or less absent. Of course, the alternative is to put a person in power who is at least sympathetic with the devotional aspects. So that is possible, and we do have some leaders in the world, like in India, they're sympathetic. So good in one sense. They can't do everything, but they can do something. And of course, it's a gradual process as well. That's one way of looking at the problem. And of course, the other thing is to work, as I said previously, at the bottom and start influencing the population in general. So this is already what Prabhupada has suggested previously, that we at least influence the people of Kali Yuga through Nam Sankirtan, because this is the Yuga Dharma, which is most easily that's influential on people and can be adopted by people. So this is the most powerful means at our command. And Prabhupada in the previous purport, he mentioned that Kali Yuga has this great advantage to it, that we do have Nam Sankirtan as the main process, and it's authorized by the Supreme Lord to influence people in a major way. We call Nam Sankirtan the Yuga Dharma, which means the main spiritual process for the people of Kali Yuga. So in every age we have a spiritual process. So this is a little bit independent of the other Dharma, that is Varnashram Dharma. That goes on. Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga. And then beginning of Kali Yuga, we say a little bit is there. So that goes on. And then we have that other Dharma, the Yuga Dharma, which is bhakti. So it is meditation in Satya Yuga, it is doing sacrifices in Treta Yuga, it is doing deity worship in Dwapara Yuga, and it's Nam Sankirtan in Kali Yuga. So, in Kali Yuga, there's an absence of the king, and therefore it's difficult to implement the other Dharma, that is the Varnashram Dharma, properly. But we do have the other Dharma, the Paro Dharma, that is the Yuga Dharma, which is Bhakti and Nam Sankirtan. So that we can work on anyway. Just as in other ages they had the prominent process, so in Kali Yuga, this is the prominent process. Now generally the two things go together. We have the Varnashram system and we have the Yuga Dharma going together, and they support each other. Present time, we don't have that. There's no Varnashram Dharma, no king, but we do have the Yuga Dharma in some places. So therefore at least one type of Dharma is there, the Yuga Dharma is there. Even if the other Dharma isn't there. So the nature of bhakti in general is that it acts independently of that other system, that is the Varnashram Dharma. You can have it or not have it, but you can still do bhakti. So we have the different yugas and different times. There were places under Varnashram, and there were also places that weren't under the Varnashram system. They didn't have that Dharma. They were outside the system. So those persons were called the Mlechas and the Yavanas and the Svapachas, dog eaters, Chandalas, etc. They were not within the system at all. Nevertheless, they can take to the process of bhakti. So bhakti operates independently of that other system, the Varnashram system. Of course, if there is a system, it's more favorable, but even if it's not there, you can still do bhakti. And therefore we have persons outside that system practicing bhakti also. So in Kali Yuga, then the Varnashram system is not much intact. Still, the bhakti can go on. To make the bhakti easier, then we have the Yuga Dharma, that is Nam Sankirtan, among all the processes of bhakti. So this can become widespread. This is the way that bhakti can become widespread in Kali Yuga through the chanting of the holy name. In spite of the fact that we don't have that other Varnashram Dharma intact. But then of course Prabhupada said, okay, let's establish Varnashram system. That's a goal besides Nam Sankirtan. So how do we do that? If we don't have a king or whatever. So at best we can say it'll be a modified version of that Varnashram Dharma minus the king or whatever. And then as we see previously, a lot of their activities were defined by birth, etc. But our view of Varnashram is not by birth, by qualification and action and education rather than by birth. So it has to be a little bit of a different system than usually was done. So we see even the Pandavas, they were following this system. Okay, we're Kshatriyas. Karna's not a Kshatriya. He's got the wrong birth. We won't fight with him. We won't let him participate at all. This is one of their things. So it was all by birth. A lot of it was by birth. And the whole war was over birthright. Who can be the king by birth? Which family by birth is entitled to rule the kingdom? Is it Dhritarashtra's sons or is it Pandu's sons? So it's all by birth again. So and of course, the whole of Manu's dynasty from Vaivasata Manu down is traced by birthright. It's not just qualification. You're a good king, we'll put you a king. No, you had to come in that line of kings. Of course, those lines were empowered by the Lord. There's special Shakti in the Manu and his descendants. So they're called Vibhutis of the Lord. They have special power. So there is some, besides just being hereditary members, they're also got qualification. And if they didn't have the qualification, of course, they're excluded, as in the case of King Vena. He came in Swayambhuva's line, but he was useless, so they rejected him. And again, in Dhritarashtra's line, then Duryodhana got rejected. But anyway, the line of their hereditary line is there. But our view of Varnashram is not so much by birth, especially in Kali Yuga, but by qualification. So therefore, we have to adapt things to some degree within that system. And it appears that whereas there was a balance between the Varnashram system and the Bhakti in other ages, both things were done. In Kali Yuga, as I said, the Varnashram system is not much there. So in many places it isn't there at all. So therefore, the Bhakti becomes the stronger element. And so we have to rely on Bhakti more than that system. So there's less dependence upon that system, even if we try to establish it. So therefore it's a goal, but it's a little bit of a struggle to implement it because we have to modify everything. And at best it's a secondary role, takes a secondary role. And actually in one place Prabhupada in the Bhagavatam it says that, okay, we established Varnashram. What is Varnashram? Varnashram is chanting Hare Krishna. So of course that's the basis of everything, a spiritual life. And out of that we can evolve some sort of social system for everybody with, let's say, practical rules for uplifting everybody somehow or other, based upon the Varnashramic model outlined in Manu, but modified considerably due to the, let's say, the situation at the present time. So the reason for this emphasis on Varnashram is because devotees do not live in a vacuum. They live with people, other people, and they live in a society. And that little society lives in a greater society. So you need some rules to live within these different groups. So therefore, Bhakti does not prescribe those rules. It just says hearing, chanting, remembering, deity worship, etc. It doesn't talk about how you relate with your family, how you relate to other people, how you relate to the leaders, how you relate to other countries. It doesn't say anything about that. So we do need, as far as most people are concerned, except a completely renounced person in the Himalayas or a Babaji in Radhakund, but you do need some sort of rules for interacting with other people, especially for grihastas, who are the majority of the devotees. So they need rules. So therefore, this emphasis upon the varnashram system becomes, we could say, a little bit, there's a little bit of emphasis there in Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his works. He emphasizes that, it's a pure system, it's a perfect system, and any civilization has to have a varnashram system. He says, so he emphasizes it. And he says that generally the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they will follow the varnashram system. Like Lord Chaitanya and his followers, they operated within a varnashram system. It wasn't perfect at that time because Muslim influence was there and things were getting destroyed at that time, but there was still something there. Therefore, it existed, and then later on the British came and then got modified again. Still, in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time, there was something there. So in Lord Chaitanya's time, it followed, and later on, Bhaktivinoda also supported that system. The Gaudiya Vaishnava grihastas have to follow that system as much as they can. That is probably where Prabhupada gets that idea of, implementing a varnashram system, because we need some social support for the majority of the devotees, that is the grihastha devotees. A problem comes, of course, because then we have two different societies operating. We have the devotee society and we have the larger society. It wasn't so very prominent in Lord Chaitanya's time. The devotees were there and they were operating within that society, and there was no real problem. Nowadays, the rest of the society isn't even varnashramak. So the majority of the population is not varnashramak. In Lord Chaitanya's time, the Hindu society at least was varnashramak. Not all society, but the Hindu part of it was varnashramak, and they were following still. And the devotees operated within that system. Then the British came and the system further deteriorated, but still there was something left. But present day, there's less and less of that system. And if we go beyond India, there's no varnashram system. But you have to live in society anyway. So this is a problem. Do we impose a system on everybody? Try to do that? Very difficult. The other alternative is individually, at least, we can understand the rules by which we should live, and individually implement rules, varnashramic rules, within our family life or whatever. That far we can go. And then family life, and then within a group of devotees, you can operate and have some rules there to follow based upon the varnashramic rules. So that is a partial solution to the problem, and we can say in that way we can implement varnashram system as far as taking care of the social needs of devotees. Bhaktivinoda Thakur even goes so far to say that we consider the 9 types of bhakti, hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., to be the mukhya vidhi, or the main rules of bhakti. And then the varnashram vidhis are the secondary, gauna vidhi, the secondary vidhis of bhakti. So obviously we do have to have the main ones there, otherwise the other ones are useless. But along with the main rules for at least the grihastas, and they have to follow the varnashramic rules as well, in order to support their body in a way which is non-contradictory to the principles of bhakti. So you have to support your body, you have to raise your family, you have to maintain your family, etc. So all this is covered by varnashram. So follow those rules and then go on with your bhakti. So at least that much the devotee can do. As for the rest of society, what can we do? The main problem there, of course, is how to relate to them, because it's asatsanga. And we don't want to associate with non-devotees or whatever. So there's a problem because we do have to relate, and your job may be related to the external society, so that's another problem. One solution is to have jobs within one society. And that's how isolated groups operate, like the Amish or the different groups, Mennonites and whatever in America, certain Christian groups. They operate within only a closed circle of people, and they support themselves within that by farming mainly. But it's an isolated group, and there's no real preaching. It's just isolated. And Lord Chaitanya is trying to expand everywhere, so that model probably isn't going to work too well. Possibly we could have a hybrid model of that. Some people working inside, some people working inside outside, or whatever like that. Anyway, we have all these alternatives, and therefore the social needs have to be taken care of. We have physical needs, supporting the body, taking care of the body, cleanliness and things like that. And then we have the social needs, raising family, how to raise your children, how to relate to husband, wife, children, grandfather, grandparents, all this sort of thing, relatives, etc., how you relate to each other. But all that's covered by varnashramic system. So if we incorporate those rules, then we can have a stable, at least stable family life for the grihastas. So that's one point that has to be taken into consideration. We don't operate in a vacuum, and somehow we have to use the bhakti, but also have to incorporate those rules of varnashram. So it's a little bit of a work to see which rules to incorporate and make effective for the individual and for the groups of people. So that's some project that will have to be done. And hopefully the GBC will also work on that. That's one of our topics of discussion coming up in a few weeks in our meetings. But anyway, there was not such a problem previously because the king was expected to take this lead in establishing that varnashram dharma, acting in that way, and as well being a devotee. So we have to be aware that the varnashram does not operate in a vacuum also. There has to be the devotee king there who can influence the people. So a varnashram without the proper devotee there is asuric varnashram. It's also useless. So the two have to combine very nicely. And the balance was there in kings like Parikshit Maharaj, and therefore he could maintain peace within the kingdom and satisfaction and prosperity of the people in general. So therefore he's called a tiger among men. He was able to control things nicely, rule nicely. Okay, one other thing here. Dhira. The word dhira here means intelligent. It also means serious, sober-minded, etc. And we have within the nectar of instruction, we have utsaha, nishcha, dhairya. So that word dhairya, which means patience or control, comes from the word dhira. So therefore, Rupa Goswami mentions these as characteristics that are favorable for the devotee. They're not angas of bhakti like hearing and chanting, but nevertheless they're favorable for the development of bhakti. And if we don't have enthusiasm, that's utsaha, nishchaya, which means strong faith, and dhairya, which means this sober-mindedness or control of the senses, and patience, then it's very difficult to advance in bhakti. So they're accompanying factors of bhakti. Just as in chanting the holy name, Lord Chaitanya says you have to be humbler than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. So you have to have humility and tolerance, and respect for all living entities, and not want respect for oneself. So he says these are the qualities for chanting. So again, it's not directly an anga of bhakti, but it's how we do bhakti to make it effective. So these are the accompanying qualities that we can say are constitutional to the mode of bhakti. That is humility, respect for others, tolerance, patience, conviction, and enthusiasm. So these are constitutional to bhakti itself. If they're absent, it means the bhakti is not going proper. There's something wrong with our bhakti. So therefore, this dhira aspect is also there. Dhira, of course, as I said, means not just patience. Patience means not to expect results immediately and not get disturbed if the results don't come immediately. So if we don't get immediate results, we wait, and we don't get disturbed by that. We wait for the results to come. And in other words, the devotee is in one sense tolerant of the situation in this material world. And the other meaning of dhira was this sober-mindedness or sense control. And that's also covered in the first verse of the Nectar of Instruction. That is, we have these vegas that have to be controlled. So we have kama and krodha and tongue veda and speaking veda and the taste veda and the stomach veda and the genital veda. All these things are things that have to be controlled. So that's what a dhira is. He controls the 6 vegas, these 6 urges. So these again are constitutional to the devotee. So Parikshit was a dhira. He had these wonderful qualities of controlling all the vegas, all the urges, and he was very, very patient in his execution of bhakti yoga. And therefore we can say he was a qualified devotee of the Lord. And as the previous verse stated, he was not worried about the situation because he knew that there was a good element, Nam Sankirtan in Kali Yuga. So in spite of that, even if he left, still there was good hope for the people because there was some process. So that was his faith, which is the second element, nishchaya, to have the great faith in the whole process. So Parikshit had that great faith in the process of bhakti of Nam Sankirtan, and therefore he wasn't afraid of the influence of Kali Yuga. Okay, any questions? Well, actually, Bhaktivinoda uses that term in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita. He's the first one that coined that term. Usually he says Varnashram in the Bhagavatam, then he says Daivi Varnashram. So what he analyzes society, and that we do have classes of people. We have common laborers, which is the main backbone of our society. Then we have the people that are quite intelligent to make money. They're the Vaishya community, or the merchants. And then we have an administration role, our government, the Kshatriyas. And then we have some intellectuals of some sort who are guiding the rulers, or supposed to guide the rulers anyway. So then we get the natural divisions of society. And you'll see that even in primitive society, so-called primitive societies, they also have these roles in general. Most primitive societies, probably they're all merged together, but as we get more city life, city civilizations like that, then it's like a Roman society or Greek or Chinese cities like that, and you'll find these roles more clearly defined. But the Varnashram system is a little different, the real Varnashram system, because one, of course, it comes from the Supreme Lord in Scripture, so it's got a solid, we can say, a pramana behind it, authorized system that works. But its goal is not simply to materially progress. Its goal is ultimately moksha, to get beyond the system. And of course, beyond moksha is prema. So the whole system is not simply to make the society prosperous in a material way, but to cultivate spiritual life ultimately. It may be indirect for the people lower on the system, but ultimately this is the final goal of the system. And that has to be in the mind of the leaders at all time. So that's the Daiva Varnashram, where it's linked to bhakti, to the Supreme Lord. In other words, everything is meant ultimately for the satisfaction of the Lord. The people on the lower levels are not quite aware of it, or not too much aware of it, but by custom they just follow and they worship the Lord along with their devatas and whatever. But still, the higher you go, the more you understand the real goal of that whole thing. And so the king is there to institute all the rules so that it leads in that direction. So that's the Daiva Varnashram. The Asura Varnashram is, let us not recognize any Supreme Lord, and let's just go on and try to develop our society and make some rules to have Artha, Dharma, and Kama. The Dharma is there to support Artha and Kama, and not to lead to moksha or prema. So that's what we call the Asura Varnashram. We see that Hiranyakasipu was trying to preach to Prahlad. You have to learn all Artha and Kama and all these things like that. So basically that was it. No Supreme Lord, no Vishnu, just Artha and Kama. It looks good for a materialist. It looks very good. Yeah, let's concentrate now on our thing. Worry later about, if there's God or no God. Let us just concentrate on developing materially. But from a scriptural point of view, it's not going to work. It's going to collapse. It won't work. Yeah? And then we find Duryodhana. Apparently he was ruling for some time, and in one sense he was a very good ruler. He was able to enforce the rules and do things very, very nicely. So some people thought, what's wrong with him? why you're opposing him? And the reason is he just rejected the Supreme Lord also. So therefore that's a demoniac varnashram. Everything is quite similar, but no recognition of the Lord. And because of that, then ultimately the system won't work. It looks, short term it will work, but ultimately it will collapse because of self-interest, because of selfishness. All these things of Kali Yuga, the pride, and then the money, and then all the sinful activities, they start coming up, and it's very difficult to control those things because that higher goal is not there. Higher taste is not there, lower taste will take over eventually. And we'll see also in civilizations, this is basically what happens. Roman civilization collapses at a certain point. They get too hedonistic. They lose any idea of, Dharma itself. What is the goal of Dharma? It's only there to control people so we can get more pleasure. And then it collapses.
With communism, what's going on that is like everything for the state, for the people, but Prabhupada sometimes talks about spiritual communism. Does he refer to that as being everything like centered around Krishna? Is that?
Yeah, ultimately everything belongs to Krishna, not everything belongs to the state or everything belongs to the people. Everything belongs to God. Or at least that's the consciousness behind everything. And then everything we use, we may own it technically, legally, but we're using it ultimately for progress in spiritual life. So this is Bhakti would emphasize this is a lot, that you don't have to renounce and give up anything. You can practice family life and whatever, and have a job and all of that, but you mold everything in such a way that your aim is Krishna consciousness for yourself and your family. That's all, and it's okay, and then you can succeed in spiritual life that way.
A little bit interested in, you mentioned the GBC is going to have upcoming discussions on guidelines for social, for Grihastha ashram, or what is it?
I have no idea what it is because we put it up because we had in the GBC we asked the different GBCs, okay, what are the important topics we should discuss because we can't do it in Mayapur and we can't do it in our midterm meeting, and I think it was Pune we're going to have meeting. We can't do that now. So what are the topics you would like to discuss? And then I think one of the topics was Varnashram, but they didn't quite specify what about Varnashram. It's a huge topic, obviously. They just said Varnashram. So I think 7 people mentioned that one. And then, of course, even before that, the EC, me and Ramai Swami and Bhakti Chaitanya Swami, we were discussing, and then we thought that we would have our strategic planning group, which they meet every week and have meetings like this, and so we also gave that topic to them, what to do with this topic, how do we deal with Varnashram. So then they put something together also. So they have a presentation to make on that. So what that is, I don't know. What is their idea about it? Who are also, they consist of GBCs plus some other devotees also. So what actually it'll happen out of that, I don't know, but it will look more maybe towards farm communities or something like that, maybe like that, how to implement farm communities which are successful, because we've been trying to do that for many years, but most fail. They don't work, they struggle. The ones in America struggle, they don't really succeed as a successful community or as a successful model for anything really. So we have to discuss that.
I'm just thinking, when after years being in the ashram, when I got married, it was basically the instruction that given at the time was good luck.
Okay.
And the rest of the dollars. And because we have all these young devotees who come through the ashrams and dedicate their lives, it would be nice to have
training.
Ashram main deals with Grasa Ashram anyway. If there was some sort of
guidance and standards and whatever.
Their responsibilities. They should act and so on and so forth. Buddies and the work zero guidance and instruction.
In Chopati, I think they have evolved a system for counseling people who are getting married too. So they must have worked out a set of rules or standards or guidelines for them. It must be there. Whether it's completely varnashram or not, I don't know, but it's probably based on it to some degree. So there are some systems available. So it'll be interesting to see also what the strategic planning comes up with when they make the presentation in next month, I guess it is, or so.
Another question, if that's okay. Just earlier actually the translation of Purport mentions this idea of these fearless personalities in devotees. But there's also a famous quote, Srila Prabhupada being quoted as saying that the problem of disciples, they do not fear Maya. So can you speak about that idea of being fearless at the same time having...
Fear of Maya. That also comes up, I think, when Ramai Swami, he mentioned about Balaram being born, and before that it describes how the 6 children were slain, and they were representing the different senses, the 5 senses in the mind, and that Devaki was afraid that her sons would get killed or whatever. She had fear like that. So then the idea was that we should fear the senses in the mind. In other words, we understand they're dangerous, but then we also have the means of counteracting that, just like we have the 6 the Vegas mentioned in Upadeshamrita, and definitely we have to understand this is a problem. In that sense we fear them. But then we have control over them. We have a system to control that through the process of bhakti. So definitely we do have to understand the material world is a place of fear or whatever. We have to be very careful. We can't take it casually. And therefore the other word here is apramatta. Was very careful. Was very attentive. So yes, he was fearless, but he wasn't foolish also. So he just had to be careful in certain circumstances also. So that we can say that's the devotee. He understands the nature of the material world, and we can't just take it all casually, because it's a big trap for us and we can fall into illusion at any moment. So we do have to have that type of fear, but at the same time we have confidence in the process of bhakti. Okay. Hare Krishna.